Joining us now, NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, Punchbowl News co-founder and MSNBC political analyst Jake Sherman, and former press secretary to former House Speakers Paul Ryan and John Boehner. Brendan Buck, also an MSNBC political analyst. So, Ryan, there was some last-minute concern that this thing might fail in the Senate. It did not. It's with the House. Let's move on. Any indication that there's going to be any wrangling in the House?
Well, they really can't wrangle all that much, to be honest with you, Katie. They're in a position now where an identical version of this bill needs to be passed by the House if they have any hope of getting it to the president's desk by the 4th of July. And so they cannot do what we saw take place here in the Senate, where they kept a vote open for an elongated period of time to try and tweak and change the bill at the last minute, because if they change even a syllable of the current piece of legislation, they're back to the drawing board, and it could then lead to a conference committee or more negotiations with the Senate. And the general consensus is when you have a bill of this size and scope, the longer people have to take a look at it and read it and really get into the nitty gritty of it, the less popular it gets. So what Speaker Johnson, the task that he has in front of him is to try and convince particularly the conservative Republicans that are most upset with the changes that were made in the Senate to get on board and vote yes, because if they change anything or if they balk or if they vote no, it's going to be a much longer period of time before this bill gets to President Trump's desk. Saying all that, Katie, ultimately, though, every time you go down this road and you have this exercise in your head about whether or not there are going to be Republicans that stand up and vote no, it's really hard to come up with 4 House Republicans that are going to say no to Donald Trump if he says it's time to vote yes.
Yeah, and by the way, we're watching the Rules Committee. They're debating the bill in the House. Once it gets through the Rules Committee and goes to the floor, Speaker Mike Johnson can hold a vote, and we'll see if that happens before the Friday deadline. Let me talk to you, Jake, about I guess what this is going to mean in the country. And first off, Ryan, you did an interview with Lisa Murkowski on why she ended up voting yes on this bill. I want to play it.
Do I like this bill? No, because I tried to take care of Alaska's interests. But I know that in many parts of the country, there are Americans that are not going to be advantaged by this bill. I don't like that.
So she knows, Jake, that there are many Americans in many parts of this country who are not going to be advantaged by this bill. They're not going to be helped by this bill. What is the political risk here for Republicans?
I mean, where could you start? I mean, anytime you cut something and you take away benefits from any segment of the population, you run the risk of electoral consequences. It's kind of amazing to hear somebody who just voted for a bill say they don't like the bill. People could be heard from it, yet they voted for it anyway. And Lisa Murkowski, I mean, I'm always struck. The entire Senate was oriented around Murkowski for the last 24 hours. I mean, she got more in this bill for Alaska than I've seen anybody get in any bill in probably in my time covering Congress. I mean, she got a special tax treatment for subsistence whalers. She got special treatment for fisheries in her state. I mean, just a whole bunch of stuff for Alaska. But, you know, Katie, Brendan and I, and we're lucky that we have him on air because we have a long-running debate about whether this gets done by July 4th. And July 4th is a deadline that doesn't matter. Let me start with that. This is a completely made-up deadline that the House and Senate put on themselves. And I just think I hear what Ryan is saying, and I understand intellectually his argument, and part of me agrees with it, that there are not 4 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people who will go against Donald Trump. But here's my point. And again, I'm not making predictions either way. There's no evidence that I've ever made any predictions, but every single step of the way, Katie, Mike Johnson has said, get us past this hurdle. We're going to get him the next time. We're going to get him the next time. He can't say that anymore. This is the bill that is presented to them. As Ryan rightly noted, they cannot change this thing without it having to go back to the Senate. I just don't know if everyone's going to fall in line this time. I'm not saying they won't, but there's certainly more incentive to not fall in line this time and to say, listen, July 4th is a made-up deadline. We could go back at this next week. We could try to improve it. And also, Murkowski said, I hope they send this bill back to us. So I don't know. I'm not, again, not making any predictions. I just think that this is not certain at this point. Now, Brendan, go ahead and tell us all why we're wrong.
Brendan, go take it away.
Well, first of all, we all remember what happened last time Jake and I had a disagreement and who won on that one. Exactly.
Yeah.
Look, there's a lot of reasons for conservatives, moderates in the House to have a problem with what the Senate did. And they're obviously doing that. I will say this. I have a hard time taking seriously conservative complaints that what the Senate did is bad. The bill cuts Medicaid further. It cuts taxes further. I'm convinced that whatever the Senate did, you would have House Freedom Caucus members saying this was terrible and we can't go along with this. Now, they're going to ask for things. They're probably going to demand things next time. I know the bill doesn't, if they pass it here, there is no real next time, but there's always a next time. They'll promise something on the government funding deadline, or they'll promise another reconciliation bill. They'll keep stringing people along, and eventually they'll get there because, yeah, if they don't just pass this, we're not talking about a couple extra days. We're talking about potentially weeks or a month. And I don't think they're willing to do that. And I think Donald Trump's going to get very impatient. And we've seen this time and time again. Mike Johnson has gone to the floor, unsure if they're going to get there. And every time they've gotten there, there's no, I think, Katie, we've talked about this before. There's no elegant solution here that makes everybody happy. So in that case, the really only play for the leadership is just vote. Just bring it to the floor. You're not going to make anybody happy. And basically put to test the entire strategy here the entire time has been, we don't think our members will allow this to fail. And here's their chance to prove that right.
There's no elegant solution. I keep hearing that. But, I mean, you could raise taxes and then eat into the deficit. You could raise taxes and protect Medicaid. There are a number of Republicans who want those things. I mean,
you could do that, but you couldn't pass it.
Why not? I mean, Donald Trump at one point was saying that he would be for taxing people who make more than $100 million a year. There was a proposal that was put out by Senator Kelly. Tax people more who make more than $100 million a year. They can afford it. Why is Congress so unwilling, Republicans and even some Democrats, so unwilling, but Republicans right now, to tax people who make an ungodly amount of money more?
Well, I'll try and take that, Katie. I don't know who you were asking, but I'll try and take that.
Anyone can take it. You three can take it. Go through it.
Yeah.
Brian, you can start.
I give you about 10 different reasons why I think that's the case. And we should also point out that Senator Collins put an amendment during Vote-A-Rama that would tax people making more than $25 million a year as a way to try and fill some of this Medicaid gap. But I think there's two big answers. One, the biggest donors to these political candidates come from that tax bracket, and they do not want to see their taxes increased, and they will penalize any particular member of Congress who votes to raise their taxes. That's the first thing. But then the Republican perhaps clean argument, the one that Brendan Buck would make if he were still a press secretary, is that if you tax the job creators, those jobs are going to go away, and the economy is not going to continue to roar at the level that Donald Trump thinks that it can. That's the argument they make every time you make any sort of a suggestion to tax the rich. And what they often leave out of that equation is that when they make the promise that these tax cuts are going to lead to overwhelming growth that will offset the cost of those tax cuts, that rarely, if ever, comes to bear. And so I think the point you're trying to make, Katie, which I think is a salient one, is that no one's saying across the board massive tax increases. It's a relatively small slice of the economy and a very modest tax increase to the people making the very most money, but would benefit the general coffers of the federal government in ways that could probably solve a lot of these problems. But it's just something that members of Congress just do not seem willing to entertain.
You know, I'm trying to Google right now, how many Americans make more than $100 million a year? And I think the number is pretty small. I think it's 400 Americans, 435 Americans, but I'm gonna wait for Google to tell me, and then for my team to check it. But Brendan, I guess did Ryan correctly characterize your argument that this is trickle-down economics and it benefits everybody?
It's not trickle-down economics. It's small businesses, I think, is the argument that people would make. Most small businesses pay their taxes through the individual rate. But look,
do Americans who make $100 million, are those small business
I guess what
owners?
I'm telling you, yeah. So let's put that in the bill. Let's tax 100 millionaires. You're not making a dent into the cost of this. I mean, there's real money there, but you're not paying for any of this. I mean, that's gonna they talked about potentially putting the top rate for people who make $500,000 or more. I mean, that's a lot of people. And we were maybe talking about $1 trillion instead of the $3 trillion that it has cost. So that's one thing you could do. You would lose a lot of votes, and you would still have a lot of people saying this adds to the deficit.